Howdy y'all, Fast Forward 289, welcome back. In this video, we're working on my 1977 Ford truck, and we're going to be changing out the steering shaft that goes from the steering column to the gearbox. On these four-wheel drives, they have another shaft that goes from the steering column to the gearbox, and the U-joints get worn out and create slop in the steering. So we're going to jump into that and get that replaced. So let's take a look at the parts we got and see what it's going to take. All right, here's what we got to replace the stock one with. This is what they ship you. I ordered this from LMC Truck. And in the picture, it showed, they had like different ones, but the one I ordered, it showed the piece for the rack joint and then going to the steering column. So I thought that's what it would be. But what this actually is, it's just a universal. It's like something you'd buy for like a rack and pinion conversion kit. And it's got these two U-joint ends. Goes on here, you got to cut the bar to length, and that goes on here. And then, of course, you got the other one that goes up to the steering column. And it's adjustable as far as length goes. But we're still going to have to cut this bar to make it fit. But good unit. It's actually better than what's in the truck now. So this is actually be an upgrade. But it's not just a simple bolt-in procedure. There are modifications you got to make. There's measurements, and you got to make sure you do it right. But the good thing is, since the bar is adjustable, you have a little bit of leeway. If you make a little bit of a mistake, it's not the end of the world. So there's the part number for it. It says Shaft Kit 7079 Ford truck, and it says right there Unisteer Performance Products. I thought that was pretty cool that even though I ordered this from LMC, Unisteer is the company that actually makes this. So that's pretty neat. And they give you instructions on how to measure it and everything and whatnot. So let's go take a look at the truck, see what it's going to take to get the old one out. All right, so to get in here to this shaft that we got, going from the gearbox to the steering column, we need to get this out of our way so we have room to work. Okay, to give you a close-up, it's kind of hard to see in here with these brake lines along the way, but you see how it connects to the gearbox here with the traditional rack joint, and the shaft bolts in here, the coupler, and then this bolts to the gearbox. We come on up here, we come to the steering column, and you see it bolts onto the shaft of the steering column here, and here's a U-joint. You can see it. We got play in that U-joint because it's just old and worn out. So we got to take this bolt here out and pull it up the shaft and come down here and actually remove this whole assembly from the gearbox because the other shaft will replace all that. What I'm going to do is go ahead and spin this around where I can get to this bolt down here and go ahead and take this whole thing off. Now, the easy way to do it is to come inside the truck here, and you come underneath your cover here for the steering column and take your two screws out, pull this cover down. There's two 1/2-inch bolts in there. Loosen them, and then you can get in here and pull this entire steering column and everything back. And then tighten the bolts back down so it don't slide back down, and then you can just pull that shaft right out. Alrighty, so when it comes to this, there's a 12-point bolt down here that we're gonna have to get to. It's supposed to be facing straight up and down. When I put it back together, I forgot to put it in right, but it's fine. We're removing it now. Okay, so when it comes to removing this bolt, you have to have a 12-point socket or wrench. So you're gonna need a socket that looks like this, or use the boxed end of a wrench that has a 12-point. All right, now we should be able to just pull the steering column back and it'll slide right off. All right, just like that, it'll pop right off. Okay, so anytime I do something like this, I like to test fit my parts to make sure that, for one, they fit, but also to make sure that they feel like they're supposed to. If you have one that's really loose and it just doesn't feel tight on here, I would not recommend using it, because even though you can tighten the bolt down and squeeze it together where the split is, it'll give a little bit. This is your steering, and if something was to happen, that bolt gets loose or whatever, you don't want this to slip and lose your steering. This one's nice and tight, like it goes on just like the original. You can also come in here and go ahead and test fit your bolt to make sure it's going to clear, because there's a notch in this steering column, right, or this gearbox right here. That bolt that goes in here has to line up with that notch. So we can put it in here and kind of get an idea. Is it going to clear? Is it going to hit the gearbox when it's all bolted in? This is the bolt they give you in the kit. It's an Allen cap head bolt for the lock washer. And it's going through the slot, it sounds like. I didn't tighten it, but it's all the way through. It's bottomed out on the lock washer, so I didn't torque it down, but it's snug. So I just put it here to make sure everything's gonna clear. You wanna look at this gap, make sure you're not rubbing up against your gearbox. We got plenty of clearance there. You wanna look in here and see your shaft right there for the gearbox. Make sure it's not sticking through. Now this one actually hits. Usually they tell you make sure it'll clear where this will fold completely up, but it's not important on this application because it's not this steep of an angle for the steering. In all honesty, it's pretty much a straight shot. It's gonna be roughly somewhere in the neighborhood of that when it's installed. So it's almost a straight run. You got to have a U-joint because there is a little bit of variation and it will move a little bit as you're steering, but it's not going to be all crazy like this on some cars, how the angle was really tight. It's not going to be that tight on this one. So that's fine. It's got plenty of movement room, so that's fine. So we're good to go on this one. Now I need to get the shaft pulled out. Also, that's something else I wanted to cover on is this bolt. You want to make sure not only will it clear the shaft, but make sure that it will not pull off. You see how that's, because what this is a lock bolt. So then I don't really see how it can slip off, but crazy things happen. This is to ensure that it doesn't slip off the spine, and again, you lose your steering. So I loosened this bolt back up. I didn't take it out. I just loosened it just enough to give this some slack and pull on it and see if it'll come off. See how that one's stopping? So it's doing its job. That's exactly what you want. If it pulls off with the bolt in, don't use it. It's not safe. Okay, so it was pretty hard to get that bolt out. I finally got it out. I had to use my impact on it because it was tight. I just couldn't get no leverage up here. It's a tight spot to get to with my wrenches. So I just used my impact and zipped it on off. You get your pry bar and come in here between the steering column and that shaft. And hopefully it'll slide right on off of here with a little bit of work. Alrighty guys, I finally got this shaft out. Here's what I had to do, because it was, and yours is probably gonna be the same way. I'm sure this one's never been removed. If it has, it was a long time ago. I had to work at it for a minute. So what I ended up doing to get it out is I could get up in here and kind of hit the top of this a little bit and work it. But what I did is I took this and picked it up, worked it around the brake lines and got it up as high as I could. And where there's that flat spot down there on the shaft, I could just hit it right there. I could swing on it and hit it a little bit, hit it up there at the top a little bit, come work it back and forth. And it finally popped on off of there. And here is another place you can see what I'm talking about. So this is where the bolt goes through. This is where it hooks to the steering column. You can see a little bit of a hammer mark there where I could hit it a little bit. Get a little bit of a swing on it, hit it there. But I would raise this arm up here as high as I could get it to go. And I would just take my hammer and hit it right here on this flat spot and just work it and work it and work it. It was so tight, it took me some time to get it. Right here, you got that plastic bushing. Do not put a pry bar on there. I actually started to do that one time, not thinking, and you can see a little bit of the plastic crumble a little bit. The plastic's old, the heat cycles of the engine and being hot and cold, they get brittle. That's the bushing, and it's not as important on a two-wheel drive because you have the gearbox like mounted right here. On a four-wheel drive, though, you need that bushing in place for stabilization of the shaft. So don't break it and don't pry on it. So we're getting ready to start figuring out how long this shaft needs to be. One thing is when you hit your ends, see they move. They got this bolt here with a slit or a divot in the shaft, just like the factory gearbox and steering column shaft does. But it's got a little bit of play. You don't want it like this because it should never be that tight in that truck, but you don't want it like that just in case your steering will get hung up then. That's not good. Like I said, in this truck, it's never going to get that tight anyway because this is pretty much a straight line, so it's going to pivot like that, but that's about it. But either way, I don't like it to be that far up, so I like to kind of even them up, and then I'll take and tighten my Allen wrench down. Okay, so the instructions say you want to pull the bar out as far as it'll go, measure it, then push it in as far as it'll go, measure it, split the difference between the two numbers, find the center, and then from there is where you want to match up your existing shaft to the new one. Or if you don't have a shaft, and let's say you're converting to rack and pinion in another car, which this don't apply to this truck, but you can measure from the divot in the gearbox to the divot in the steering column shaft. And then just make sure that you match up where it's going to go in the steering column. Like this is where the bolt goes in that divot. So you just want to make sure you find it that way. And since this bar is adjustable in and out, you have a little bit of wiggle room. So if you don't get it exactly right, it don't have to be perfect. If you don't get it exactly right, it could be a little bit off. It'll still work because this shaft moves in and out. So you have 5.5 inches of range on this bar. So I'm gonna go through and show you. All right, so it says pull it all the way out, which I did. We're gonna get a tape measure, and we're gonna go. I'm just gonna measure right in here because this is gonna be centered with this. So it's gonna be even with that when I trim it down. So we're gonna go right in here and pull it to the end. And you can see here we have just under 26. So we can round up. It's 25 and 15/16 roughly. So it's a 16th off. We're just gonna say 26 because it's easier to figure out the math. So it don't have to be exactly perfect. So now that we figured that, we'll push the bar all the way in. Let's push it in until it stops. And we'll take another measurement. And from here we have right at 20.5. So we said 26 before, 20.5 now. It's 5.5. You could say 2 3/4, and that'll give you the center point. So basically what you'd want to do is either take, and since we got 20.5 here, pull this out till we get 23 1/4, or you could pull it out all the way and do it that way too. But since we already got it in, we'll just go, and actually I will pull it out all the way. Since I know it's got a good firm stop point. Oh, it firm stop too, but this bushing kind of feels soft. At least when I pull it out, I know it's a good hard stop. So we can just pull this out, and we'll push it in until we get to 23 1/4 down at the end. All right, so if we look, we got 26. So we're gonna push this bar in a little bit, and we'll take another measurement. Now we're at about 24. So we'll just keep pushing it in until we get 23 1/4. So yeah, we're right at 23 1/4. All right, so once you got your center found, I got my 23 1/4 ready to go. What you could do is just take this, if you wanted to do it this way, and lay it side by side. Make sure these two ends are even from how they're going to sit, because it'd be exactly the same. Make sure they're even on this side, and then come down here. Now you don't want to cut it exactly at the end of this, because then that means your shaft, it'll be too long, so you can always go back and trim it. You're better to cut it too long than too short. But what you want to do is, this is where this shaft ends. Well, this is the end that goes down on the gearbox, which means it's got to be in line with that one. So you could take and mark it here, and then take this end and put it flush with your mark. Or just if you want to get something and just make sure you're even. Once you get it even, not mark on this side, but on this side of this. Because if you mark here, now your shaft is too short, because look, there's nothing for it to grab to. But if you mark it here on this side, right, that's how much shaft is going to go up inside here. So you got to have that much to go up in here. And again, you want it to be even in here whenever you put it in here, tighten it down. This for set screws, we'll get into that once I get it all cut to length like it needs to be. All right, the other way is you could get your tape measure and come in here, and where you have this notch is, measure from this notch all the way down to the gearbox and this notch, and then go back to the table. And then you want to measure from that pivot point in this bolt here, where it's going to pivot in that groove in the spline. And then take your other piece, and you want to line it up with, now when I measured mine from steering column to gearbox, I got 18 inches from groove to groove. And also make sure that when you measure, your steering column is pushed back down all the way in the hole. Because remember, we pulled it up to get this bar out. Make sure you push it back down all the way before you take your measurement. But line up, tape measure in the center of this hole here, and then take your other one and line it up with the 18 mark. We're going to line up with the center of this bolt hole, because this is going to be the bolt that goes to the groove. So center to center of the bolt hole for the groove. You should have 18 inches once it's lined up. Once you have 18 inches like that, then you can come in here and make sure you mark on the inside of this universal joint. Don't mark here, because if you cut your shaft here, it'll be too short. Cut it here, and then it'll line right up. And if we look, even though, and make sure your bar is still centered. Now, I don't know why it's exactly off. There might be a little bit of variations, even though I use this as a template. I put this even with this and marked it. It's a little bit off, as you can see. Here's my mark, and then you see how it's off when I line up my center mark here with the center mark in that one. It's not quite there. I'd say that's off maybe half an inch at the most. Not a big deal. We have that play here, so it's not a big deal. So that's how you want to do it, and that'll get you very close. And like I said, again, you're better off to cut a little bit too long than too short, because you can always come back and trim it and trim it and trim it and get down to where you need to be. And you do have the adjustability to help with that as well. But if you cut too short, then you're just kind of out, and then you're stuck. So just make sure you measure twice, cut once, and just preparation. That's all it is. Just double check and double check again. All right, so I took it to the bench grinder, cleaned it up. A whole lot smoother, rounded my edges off, so then that'll slide on. And again, that's not exactly a perfect cut. I actually probably need to clean it up a little bit more, but that'll work. If you don't have a bench grinder, you can use a file. The inside here don't matter. It don't have to be clean as long as it's flat and the edges are rounded. And you see that's a pretty straight cut now. So we're good to go. And my fitting slides on and off real easy. So that's good. So let's get it put together. Okay, as we can see, I have this flush, and it is real close to the end here, so we're good. We have that adjustment, so we can pull it when I go to put it in the truck, and it'll line up perfectly. So we're good to go. This is ready to go. The only other thing we have to do is I have to drill a hole for my set screws. One here and one over here. That's easy. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. On this, it's very important. Tighten these very tight. I put this in the vise to get some leverage on it, because to just snug these, it will still slide up and down. Even though it's got that groove, it ain't going to fall off, but it's loose. You can slide it up and down that shaft. So really bear down on those. Don't strip them, but you want to tighten them really tight. I just used this right here, and I just was able to put this in the vise and just really crank down on this and turn it to get some leverage on it, because I didn't want mine to move at all. And it don't move at all now. It will not move. So it's very important to do that for both ends. This one here will obviously go to the steering column, so you have to do that in the truck. It'll be a little bit more difficult, but it is what it is. And the same thing with that, that's on the gearbox. So, or vice versa. Like I said, you can swap this around, but I'm going to just hook this end up to the steering column, I believe. So, and like I said, if I want to, I can always take it out. And since it's the exact same spline, I can flip it around later. All right, so I went in and test fit this to make sure it would reach like it's supposed to, and it fits perfectly. It just collapsed to give you room, and then you can pull it out, which this one's gotten kind of tight for some reason, but which is actually good. Tighter the better. But once it's in there, it's staying. But you can pull this out to make it line up, and it'll work perfect. So what we got to do now is put this in there, and we want to put this in there to where it's level. Just like the other end, how I did it, we want it to be flush with the inside there. That way, if it had to, it can pivot, but it's not going to go that far on this truck. But you want it even. And we're going to come in here, we're going to put these set screws in place. If you notice, these set screws have like a little knurl on the end. Well, that's so you can screw this in here. Once you get it in place, screw these set screws in here and tighten it down. And what that's going to do is leave a little mark on there to show you where to drill it. Now, on this shaft, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a hole completely all the way through one side. I'm not going to drill it through the other. I could do that and then have it come in contact to where this long one here, which this here only had the knurl on it, so you can tell it's meant to go all the way through. I could have it to where it went all the way through and does like that, and that would work, but then I'd have to get a drill bit down in here without messing up my threads and put a little divot down in here so then it doesn't, you know, walk out. It's not going to walk out anyway because it's in the hole, but I don't want to do that for extra security. Not draw all the way through it, just put a little divot. But instead what I'm going to do is drill a hole in the side of this shaft. And one side, it'll come through the shaft like this. And after I drill a hole through it, I'm going to divot. I'm going to run this set screw all the way through it and see where it's going to be. Then put a little divot in this pipe, in this tube. And then when I put it in there, it's going to sit inside the tube here. And what that's going to do is push that tube up against this to hold it tight. Then also we have the top set screw. And all I'm going to do for the top here is just put a little divot on it. So then when I put the set screw in, it can rest inside the metal and make it where it won't slide out. So it'll be extra double secure. And on top of that, we're going to use red Loctite on the set screws. I'm only going to use it on the set screws only, even though it comes with these nylon lock nuts to lock them set screws. I recommend the red thread locker for extra precaution. Now, when it comes to these bolts here, that screw in here, I'm not going to use red thread locker because you need to be able to get these out. If you ever have to pull the shaft back out, if you can't get these out to pull it off the shaft, well, then you're in trouble. All right, so if we're looking here, like I said, you can see that shaft. You want it even. I know it's set in the right spot. We'll go ahead and put our side set screw in and mark it first. We're just going to tighten this down to set our mark. Just like so. And pull this out. Now it's tight because it left a knurl. See there? Left a nice little mark. Now we'll know exactly where to drill it. Okay, I'm going to get my automatic center punch. I'm going to go right in the center of this hole. And that's where we're going to drill our hole out. I'm going to be using a 7/64 drill bit for my pilot bit. Now we're just going to open it on up until we get to the right size drill bit that'll let this slide through there. My final drill bit size was a 5/16, and that fits perfectly. It'll go right through there now. I have a little bit of a burr here, so the inside don't matter, but the outside here does. Our U-joint won't slide over smoothly, so I'm going to take my flat file and just file this down, knock that edge off. And it don't take much. That's already good right there. It slides right in like it's supposed to. All right, now take our file and just like before, clean our burrs up. Now we can go and tighten this one down to get a mark inside our tube so I know where to divot that one. Now we got our burrs cleaned up. It's clean, smooth, good to go. We got all our divots. We can take and put this back in place where it needs to be. There we go. We want to go and put our red Loctite. We're going to put a red Loctite on this stuff to help keep it from falling out. So let's do a little dab, like so. I'll take and wipe up my excess as I go along. There we go. Now we can do the next one. Same thing, a little bit of red Loctite. And then we can start tightening everything down. Good and snug there. Now we look inside here, you can see how my divot down there is lined up perfectly. So we know we're on the money on that. We can go ahead and tighten this down. You want it good and snug. And now we can take our nylon lock nuts. Now you could put some red Loctite on these. I don't really think it's necessary because it is a nylon lock nut. And as long as the threads stick above the nut a little bit, you know that it's good and secure. So we're going to take and run this down on there. And they give you two in the kit. Alrighty, and there's a finished look at it. That thing looks good. Another thing I wanted to point out that I forgot to point out on the bench is you can see how I made sure that this bolt was facing up and it's in the same plane with that bolt being stuck up, because that's the way it's supposed to be. Even from the factory, that's the way they're supposed to be. And then another reason I put this end up at the steering column, you see those set screws are over here. I got all this wide open space, whereas when you get down here, it would clear, but you know, I got less room, so I wanted more room up there. So I got more room up there, so I put it up there. But yeah, it looks good. Everything's nice and tight. I put red Loctite on the set screws, the lock nuts, everything's tight, good to go. The bar fits perfect. It's still got some adjustment room. So we're good to go. And also make sure that when you install this, make sure your wheels are straight and your steering wheel is straight, because otherwise it could be off. And if your steering wheel is off, you can just pull the steering wheel off and turn it, you know, a couple notches or whatever you got to do. It's not a big deal, but if you put it back straight, it's less work you got to do later. So, but yeah, it looks good. I'm happy with that. Time to go test drive it and see how tight it is now. Alright guys, well that's it. We got that installed in the truck, and it does drive a lot better. I can definitely tell that the steering's tighter. It feels tighter when I'm driving it. But it's still got some place. I'm thinking now the next step is to adjust the gearbox, and I'll do a video and show you how to do that, how to adjust these old Ford gearboxes. Real simple and effective. You know, it works quite well. So it's almost kind of like shimming it, you know, but real easy. You ain't even got to take the gearbox apart. And all you need is a wrench and a screwdriver. But that'll be a future video. But anyway, the truck does drive better. Works great. Couldn't be happier with it. Turned out great. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate it. If you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns relating to this video or anything in general, I don't care. You can ask me anything. Leave them in the drop box down below and I'll get back to you. And as always, I appreciate each and every one of y'all each and every day for watching. It's amazing to me, and hope we keep on growing this channel. So it's a lot of fun. Anyway, thank y'all for watching. I will see you on the next one. Take care.